What if I told you the most expensive casino ever built on the Las Vegas Strip is struggling to fill its own floor? Fontainebleau Las Vegas cost $3.7 billion to complete after nearly 2 decades of delays, bankruptcies, and broken promises. When it finally opened in December 2023, executives fled within weeks. Restaurants sat empty, and the gaming floor fell eerily quiet. This is not a story about bad luck. By the end of this video, you will see how a project this massive failed because it misunderstood what Vegas visitors actually want. Number 10. The casino floor feels unfinished. Walk into Fontainebleau, and the first thing you notice is the ceiling. 42 feet of soaring height, 173,000 square feet of gaming space, over 1,300 slot machines, and more than 120 table games spread across one of the largest casino floors on the entire Strip. It sounds impressive. On paper it is, but stand in the middle of that floor and something feels wrong. The problem is not what is there. The problem is what is missing. Energy, density, bodies. A casino is supposed to feel alive. The clatter of chips, the cheers at a hot craps table, the hum of conversation bleeding into the soundtrack of winning bells. Fontainebleau has none of that. Multiple visits throughout 2024 showed closed pit sections, empty slot banks, and long sight lines where you could see clear across the room without a single player in between. The space is so wide open that even moderate crowds look sparse. And when a casino floor feels empty, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Nobody wants to gamble alone, so they leave, and the floor empties further. Fontainebleau built one of the grandest stages in Vegas history, but without a crowd to fill it, the stage just echoes. The few players who do show up feel exposed rather than immersed. They become spectators to emptiness instead of participants in excitement, and that changes everything about the experience. You cannot manufacture atmosphere with square footage alone. You need bodies and noise and chaos. Number 9. Restaurants opened quietly, without buzz in Las Vegas. A new restaurant launch is supposed to be an event. Lines out the door, Instagram posts flooding your feed, reservations booked out for weeks. That is how the city announces arrival. But at Fontainebleau, the restaurant collection opened to something closer to silence. The resort promised 36 bars and restaurants. 15 of them were not ready on opening night. Flagship venues like Mother Wolf and Vita were shuttered despite being listed as open on the website. Guests who arrived expecting a vibrant dining scene found hallways that smelled like fresh paint and storefronts blocked by coming soon signs. Even the restaurants that did open struggled to generate the kind of buzz that defines a successful Strip launch. The food court sat mostly empty during prime dining hours. High-end spots that should have had wait lists available had tables open on the spot. There was no urgency, no sense of discovery, no social proof telling visitors this is the place to be. When your restaurants open without fanfare, you do not get a second chance at a first impression. Fontainebleau lost that window before most people even knew the doors were open. The chefs they brought in have serious credentials. The menus are ambitious, but none of that matters if diners never walk through the door in the first place. Reputation builds on momentum, and momentum never arrived. Empty tables send a message that full dining rooms cannot undo, no matter how good the food tastes. Number 8. Confusing wayfinding pushes guests away. Getting lost in a casino is supposed to be part of the experience. The subtle disorientation that keeps you wandering past one more slot bank, one more bar, one more reason to stay. But there is a difference between playful confusion and genuine frustration. Fontainebleau landed on the wrong side. Guests reported difficulty navigating the property from day one. Signage was incomplete. Rideshare pickup locations were nearly impossible to find. One driver reportedly circled the building 4 times before locating the correct entrance. The layout isolated spaces rather than connecting them. You could not stumble upon something interesting because you could not figure out how to get anywhere at all. And when guests feel lost, instead of curious, they do not explore. They disengage. They cut their visit short. They remember the annoyance more than the amenities. Wayfinding is supposed to be invisible. When it becomes the thing people talk about, you have already failed. Fontainebleau built a beautiful property and then made it feel like a maze without a reward at the center. The frustration compounds with every wrong turn. Guests start checking their phones for directions inside a building they are paying to enjoy. That is not luxury. That is inconvenience, dressed up in marble and gold lighting. First impressions shatter quickly when confusion leads the way. A property this expensive should feel intuitive. Instead, it feels like a puzzle nobody asked to solve. Number 7. Minimal foot traffic between venues. The best resorts on the Strip understand flow. Bellagio moves you from the conservatory to the casino, to the restaurants in a single continuous current. Cosmopolitan Stacks experiences vertically, so energy bleeds from floor to floor. Venetian pulls you down corridors lined with shops and street performers until you have walked a mile without realizing it. Fontainebleau does none of this. The property is massive but compartmentalized. Walk from the casino to the pool deck and you feel like you are entering a different building. Move from dining to nightlife, and the transition is jarring rather than seamless. Activity does not spill over. Crowds do not carry momentum from one space to the next. Each zone exists in isolation, and isolation kills energy. When a resort lacks natural flow, guests stop exploring. They settle into one spot or they leave entirely. There is no organic discovery, no accidental magic. Fontainebleau has all the right pieces. It just never figured out how to make them feel like a single living organism. The architecture works against itself. Hallways feel like barriers instead of invitations. You finish dinner and wonder where to go next because nothing pulls you forward naturally. That hesitation is deadly. In Vegas, hesitation means guests leave and spend their money somewhere else entirely. Flow is not a design detail. It is the difference between a resort that thrives and one that quietly bleeds out. Number 6. Nightlife never found its anchor. Every successful Vegas resort has a nightlife anchor. A club or lounge that pulls crowds so consistently it becomes the gravitational center of the entire property. XS at Wynn, Marquee at Cosmopolitan, Omnia at Caesars. These venues define the evening energy of their resorts. Fontainebleau brought LIV from Miami, a legendary club with real pedigree. On paper, it should have been the anchor. In practice, results have been mixed. LIV has drawn crowds on select nights and brought in headliners like John's Summit and Metro Boomin, but it has not become the consistent magnet that pulls visitors to the North Strip weekend after weekend. The club even shut down for a months-long renovation in late 2024, expanding to accommodate more guests after demand initially exceeded expectations. Yet even with expansion, LIV has not transformed Fontainebleau into a nightlife destination the way XS transformed Wynn. Without that anchor pulling people through the doors every Friday and Saturday, the property empties out when the sun goes down. And in Vegas, a resort without nightlife energy is a resort without a pulse. The problem is consistency. One packed Saturday does not build a reputation. You need 52 weeks of lines around the corner before the city starts calling you essential. Fontainebleau is still waiting for that momentum to arrive. And when a resort explains itself during the day, it has already lost the night. Number 5. Locals never adopted it. Every successful Strip property has a secret weapon: locals. The residents of Las Vegas who fill gaming floors on slow weekday afternoons, who keep restaurants alive during convention lulls, who become the baseline revenue that carries a property through lean times. Fontainebleau never captured that audience. From opening day, locals complained about parking fees, high table minimums, and tight slot machines. The rewards program failed to tier match players from competing casinos beyond a narrow 24-hour window. There was no compelling reason to make the drive north when station casinos offered better odds and easier access. The result was predictable. Weekday traffic collapsed. Gaming floors that should have had steady play sat quiet. The property launched a locals-only campaign in late 2025 offering free parking and dining discounts. But by then the damage was done. Habits had formed elsewhere. Building local loyalty takes years of consistent value. Fontainebleau started behind and never caught up. Locals talk to each other. They share which casinos treat them well and which ones squeeze every dollar. Word spread quickly that Fontainebleau was not player-friendly. Once that reputation sticks, changing it requires more than a parking discount. It requires a complete philosophical shift that has not happened yet. And without locals filling the gaps, every slow Tuesday becomes a reminder of how dependent this property is on tourists who may never return. Number 4. The North Strip location still works against it. Location matters in Las Vegas more than almost any other city. Tourists cluster where walking is easy. They flow between Bellagio and Caesars and Venetian without ever needing a rideshare. That natural foot traffic creates energy, and energy creates revenue. Fontainebleau sits at the far north end of the Strip, nearly an hour walk from the central action. Its closest neighbor is Circus Circus. To Casino Hop, visitors need a taxi or rental car. The property is close to the convention center, which helps during trade shows, but convention attendees are not the high-rolling gamblers Fontainebleau was designed to attract. North Strip properties have struggled for decades. The old Riviera never overcame its isolation. The former SLS rebranded and eventually shuttered its casino. Even Resorts World, which opened just before Fontainebleau, has faced its own challenges pulling visitors north. Fontainebleau hoped to be so impressive that location would not matter, but gravity works against ambition. Tourists make the trip once out of curiosity. They rarely come back twice. The walk from Wynn to Fontainebleau feels safe during the day but sketchy after dark. Visitors describe passing vacant lots where the Riviera once stood. The area lacks the continuous stimulation that defines the heart of the Strip. Every step north feels like a step away from the action, and that psychological barrier is harder to overcome than any marketing campaign can address. Number 3. Staffing levels signal low demand. When a casino is thriving, you feel it in the staffing. Dealers at every table, servers moving through the floor, concierges ready to assist. The presence of employees creates an atmosphere of confidence and abundance. When staffing is thin, guests notice. And at Fontainebleau, guests noticed. In May 2025, the resort laid off as many as 60 table game dealers. The move was described as routine business adjustment, but the optics were devastating. A property that opened just 18 months earlier was already cutting gaming staff. It signaled something deeper than seasonal fluctuation. It signaled that demand had never materialized at expected levels. Visitors who walked the floor during off-peak hours reported minimal dealer presence. Tables sat closed. Pit sections went unstaffed. The message was clear, without anyone saying a word. This property is not busy enough to justify full capacity. And when guests sense caution instead of confidence, they lose faith in the experience itself. The dealers who remain are spread thin. Service slows. The personal touches that define luxury hospitality disappear. What was supposed to feel exclusive starts to feel neglected, and neglect is impossible to hide. When your gaming floor stretches across 173,000 square feet of polished marble, cutting staff saves money in the short term, but accelerates decline in ways that compound over time. And when a resort doesn't know who it's for, even full staffing wouldn't save it. Number 2. The brand identity is unclear. Walk into Wynn and you know exactly what you are getting. Understated luxury, attention to detail, a whisper of exclusivity. Walk into Cosmopolitan and you feel the young creative energy immediately. Walk into Venetian and the theme is inescapable. Every major Strip property has a clear identity. Fontainebleau does not. The resort leans on its Miami heritage, but that heritage means little to visitors who have never stayed at the original. The blue color palette is consistent. The bow tie design motifs reference the Miami architect. The Lapis Spa evokes coastal relaxation, but none of it adds up to a story guests can easily retell. When someone asks what makes Fontainebleau different, there is no simple answer. It is luxurious, but not the most luxurious. It is modern, but not the most innovative. It has great restaurants, but so does everyone else. Without a clear identity, Fontainebleau becomes forgettable. And in a city with this much competition, forgettable is fatal. The brand problem goes deeper than marketing. It reflects a lack of vision about who this property is actually for. High rollers have Wynn. Young nightlife crowds have Cosmopolitan. Convention visitors have Venetian. Fontainebleau is trying to be everything and connecting with no one. That is not a positioning strategy. That is confusion. And confusion does not inspire loyalty or repeat visits or the kind of word of mouth that builds empires. Number one, the energy never arrived. This is the real problem, not prices, not marketing, not even location. Energy. A Vegas resort either hums or it does not. You feel it the moment you walk through the doors. The invisible vibration of excitement and possibility. The sense that anything could happen tonight. Fontainebleau was supposed to arrive with that energy. $3.7 billion and 2 decades of anticipation should have created a property that felt alive from the first night. Instead, visitors described the opposite. Quiet hallways, empty casino pits, restaurants without wait lists, a beautiful building waiting for something to happen. In the first quarter of 2024, Fontainebleau reportedly lost $400,000 per day. Occupancy ran roughly 50% below projections. More than a dozen executives left in the first 6 months. The numbers told a story that matched the feeling on the ground. This property had not caught fire. And in Las Vegas, a resort that does not generate its own energy cannot borrow it from anywhere else. Months into operation, Fontainebleau still feels like it is waiting for permission to exist. The architecture is stunning. The rooms are beautiful. The potential is obvious. But potential without energy is just an empty promise. And right now, the most expensive building on the Strip remains one of its quietest. The question is whether that changes, or whether Fontainebleau becomes another cautionary tale about what happens when ambition outpaces connection. Vegas does not forgive hesitation, and time is already running out. The clock ticks louder with every empty weekend.